Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, vampires, occult detectives and nuclear Armageddon. It's my weekly wrap-up. So you join me near the start of Occult Detective October, the fantastic occult detective themed reading event created by MJ from the channel Reading This Life. I'll leave a link to MJ's channel in the description to the video, as well as all of the co-hosts for Occult Detective October. And if you don't know, an occult detective is effectively an investigator. They could be a professional investigator or an amateur one who investigates some kind of supernatural spooky goings on. So a subgenre that beautifully mixes horror and mystery, two of my favourite genres. I'm wearing, of course, my Occult Detective magazine t-shirt for this video. You may well see this in further videos, further of my weekly wrap-up videos during October. So I've got 3 books to talk to you about today that I finished and a couple that are ongoing. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask a question of everyone watching. So I've had to slightly change the sound setup that I'm using to film my videos. Can you tell me in the comments if you think it still sounds fine, or if there are any problems with it? Thank you. Right, let's get on with the books then. So the first thing I finished this week was one I was reading last week, which was They Own the Night by Amy McCaw, a YA 80s set vampire novel that was a lot of fun. So about a brother and sister who are at university together in Scotland. The brother is a wannabe music journalist and he ends up interviewing, I nearly forgot the word there, interviewing a guy who, whoops, the promotional postcard has fallen out of the book. He ends up interviewing a guy who on stage appears to be a vampire, so kind of adopts the stage persona of a vampire. Is he really a vampire or not? Well, read the book and you'll find out. So it was a really fun read. There's some nice kind of crime style stuff in here. So the sister has a true crime radio show. So there's a bit of investigation, there's a bit of vampirism, there's a bit of everything. It was just a fun YA read. So it's definitely YA, it's definitely not like really graphic horror. And it does have, you know, younger protagonists, so protagonists who are kind of 19, 20 years old. But a really entertaining read. I had a good time with it. After that, I read something that hadn't been on my TBR at all, but I've been not exactly in a reading slump recently, but I've been not enjoying reading quite as much as I normally do, and I wanted to read something undemanding that I knew was going to be fun. So I read The Survivalist, Book 14, The Terror by Jerry Ahern, which was complete trash, but I did enjoy it. So this is a series from the 80s. I didn't realise until recently that they are still going. So there's, or not necessarily still going, but there was some that were published this century. About this guy, John Rourke, who manages to survive a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. He rescues his family, so his wife and 2 young kids, and you know various things happen over the course of many books. By this point in the series, for reasons which are hard to explain and definitely hard to justify, his son is nearly the same age as he is, or certainly is a grown man rather than being the child he should be if the normal timeline was followed. It's very strange. So this book has 2 kind of like plots running in parallel, one with John Rourke in Iceland and one with Michael Rourke, his son, in the desert area somewhere. I think it is Egypt, as suggested by the pyramids on the cover. So lots of fun action, lots of detailed descriptions of weapons, and it builds up nicely to the next book because the evil Soviet general has a super weapon which it appears that he's going to unleash soon. So yeah, it was a fun read. The other thing I finished then was the first book I have read for Occult Detective October. So themed weeks for Occult Detective October. We are in week 1 and the theme for that is kind of vintage, so pre-1960. 1960 is the date we've set for the vintage cutoff. So I read a book of short stories originally published in Weird Tales in the 1930s. This is like a paperback edition, albeit I read it digitally, that came out in the 70s with the fantastic title of The Horror Chambers of Jules de Grandin. All the stories written by a guy called Seabury Quinn, who was a prolific writer of short stories for Weird Tales and other pulp magazines. So Jules de Grandin is described on the back of the book as the occult detective version of Hercule Poirot. So he's a French guy. And Seabury Quinn loves an accent. There are so many bits in this book with either Jules de Grandin, I forgot his name now, using strange supposedly French terms, referring to people as my little cauliflower and things like that. Or there's lots of Irish characters in these stories for some reason, and they all have really, really broad accents that take a bit of while to decipher when you are reading the book. But the stories were fun. Although I would say I read for Occult Detectives October last year another of these collections of Seabury Quinn stories, and those ones had much more of the occult side of things in it. This collection, I think probably 2 or 3 of the stories were occult. There was one about kind of a witch doctor, there was one about a poltergeist, for example, but some of the stories were just basically like weird mysteries, so nothing supernatural going on, just slightly fiendish plots for I forgot his name again, for Jules de Grandin and his assistant to solve. There was one story which, if you've read a lot of the Jules de Grandin stories, you'll probably be able to tell which one I'm talking about. I'm not going to say what it was about, but it was a complete shock and surprise to me. It's let's just say it's a little bit VC Andrews in terms of the secret at the heart of the story. I was very surprised, and there's actually an afterword in this collection where someone says that it was like quite astounding that a story with this subplot, this theme, was published in a pulp magazine in the 1930s, and apparently nobody batted an eyelid at it. But yeah, it was genuinely shocking. So that's the final thing I finished then. I'm now reading a couple of things. So I'm reading Burnt Sparrow, Book 1, We Are Always Tender with Our Dead by Eric LaRocca. So I'm about a quarter of the way through this. It is not quite what I was expecting and super intriguing. I would describe it as kind of like a cross between The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and Peyton Place by Grace Metalius. It's set in a small town in the States where there's something very strange going on. So a bunch of people, so basically this group of people came into the town and shot a load of people. And rather than burying the bodies, the townspeople have decided just to leave the bodies lying where they died. And the narrator of the book and his father are 2 people who are hired as watchmen, basically, just to keep an eye on the bodies and make sure nobody interferes with them. It's really peculiar. Some of the reviews of this book suggest it is incredibly graphic, even by Eric LaRocca standards, and his standards of graphicness are quite high. I haven't got to anything graphic yet. There's been a bit of kind of sexual content, but nothing too much. So we shall see. As I say, I'm about a quarter of the way through, but I'm really intrigued and really enjoying this so far, and kind of delighted that it's the first book in a trilogy. So the Burnt Sparrow trilogy is what it's going to be called. So I'm very interested to see what he does in this book and then what he does in the subsequent 2 books. So yes, enjoying that. And I'm also reading still The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris, not, as I said in my video last week, Russ Howard. So thank you to the person who very politely pointed out my mistake in the comments. So yes, still reading that. So self-help book, which I'm finding really, really interesting and really, really useful. So I definitely recommend it if you are someone who, like me, is plagued by negative thoughts sometimes. It's got a really interesting approach to combating those, and I'm definitely finding that useful already. Right, so what am I going to read next? So I think when I've finished the Eric LaRocca book, and I hope to finish that this weekend, I'm going to start this beast, Protect and Defend by Eric L. Harry, which is the book I'm buddy reading with my dad this month, which is 750 pages long, so looking forward to that. Right, in terms of channel stuff then, very quickly, so in the last week you've had my October TBR talking about all the things I plan to read for Occult Detective October, plus a few more things besides. You had a big book haul of mostly really, really old trashy 80s paperbacks, which was just a delight. So I really enjoy those old paperbacks. They just remind me of falling in love with reading in the first place, I guess. And maybe not falling in love with reading, because I suppose that was when I was a kid, but when I was a teenager, falling in love with the concept of being a lifelong reader and reading books intended for adults rather than just books for kids. So you had that, and then you also had my review of Last Days by Adam Neville, which is another super creepy horror novel from Adam Neville. I really think he's pretty fantastic. In the week ahead then, you're going to have a video where I talk about how I have catalogued all of my physical books, and there are over 2,000 of them. So I've now got a full catalogue of all of those books, which I can refer to whenever I want to. It syncs with my phone, so I can see on my phone if I'm out and about shopping what books I've got stored away at home, so I don't buy duplicates and things like that. So I talked through the process of how I did that in that video. You'll also have my September wrap-up and a review video, but I'm not sure what that review video is going to be of yet. I suspect it's going to be of the Eric LaRocca book, but if not, it may be something I read a while ago. Anyway, I will leave it there. Do let me know what you've been reading this week in the comments. Let me know if you're taking part in Occult Detective October. Give me a comment on the sound quality of this video if you can. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.